When you think of innovators of education and people who come along with radical ideas that shake the very foundation of education, some names may come to mind, like Horace Mann, who championed teacher training colleges, free public libraries, and free public education to all children, or Frederick Froebel, who created the concept of an environment that fosters motor activity, social interaction, free expression, and creativity for young children, an idea that would come to be called kindergarten. Or Howard Gardner, a man that believed children just don't learn through physical and verbal intelligences, but also musically, logically, interpersonal, and intrapersonal intelligences, thus the theory of multiple intelligences. But there is one man who has taken a radical chance on the systemic change of education and along the way became almost a rock star to administrators, teachers, and educational gurus around the world. That man is none other than Dr. Anthony Muhammad. In this presentation, we will take a deeper look into Dr. Muhammad's history, leadership platform, and his ideologies that connect and resonate with so many people in an education system that has been screaming for a change for decades. Anthony Muhammad was a middle school teacher, an assistant principal, a middle school principal, and a high school principal. Dr. Muhammad rose to prominence as a middle school principal at Levy Middle School in Southfield, Michigan. During his time at Levy Middle School, student proficiency scores nearly doubled in 5 years. In 2005, Dr. Muhammad was named the Michigan Middle School Principal of the Year. He credited the PLC process to his success at Levy Middle School. He became a best-selling author with his first book in 2009, Transforming School Culture: How to Overcome Staff Division. And then in 2011, he wrote The Will to Lead and the Skill to Teach: Transforming Schools at Every Level. Because of Dr. Muhammad's charismatic and relatable personality, he has become one of the most sought-out speakers to speak to schools around the country about the PLC process and how to create a positive school culture. So in order to understand Dr. Muhammad's leadership platform, we have to hit the rewind button and go back in time to January 20th, 2001. When George W. Bush became the 43rd President of the United States of America. But more specifically, in 2002, when Congress reauthorized the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. But you may know this reauthorization better as
that we can truthfully say in America, no child will be left behind, not one single child.
I don't want to go into too much detail about NCLB because that could be a presentation in itself. But it's important because the No Child Left Behind Act supported standards based on the premise that setting high standards and establishing measurable goals could improve individual outcomes in education. But what happens if your students or your school don't meet those high standards? Your school would be labeled as a needing improvement school. And if that school fell under this label for multiple years, the school would be closed and children would be relocated to new schools. No Child Left Behind was founded to hold schools accountable for performance, essentially on the idea that punishment equals change of behavior and improvement. And just like any expert or teacher in the education field, Dr. Muhammad knew that punishment is one of the worst motivators. In the first 9 years of NCLB, only 1% of failing schools made it off the failing list. Now fast forward to the Obama administration, where they extrinsically tried to motivate schools to succeed. Yet again, Dr. Muhammad knew extrinsic motivation is just as bad of a motivator as punishment. In Dr. Muhammad's words, extrinsic motivation only motivates people based off of how much they value the reward. It also creates a sense of entitlement. In the educational system, there are two forms of change. The first one is technical change. Technical change focuses on tools and structure, how you collaborate, how you look at data and assessments, and the physical environment of the school. The second change is cultural change. Cultural change focuses more on beliefs, relationships, attitudes, rules that influence the school, and the environment that fosters emotional support for students. Cultural change is a much harder change, but once a healthy culture is developed, they can develop the tools and structures necessary for success. Schools have always tried to change technically and structurally first. Schools with no walls, the K-8 model, the junior high model, the middle school model, all of which failed to move the needle in education. Dr. Muhammad's mentor, Rick Dufour, refers to the technical and structural change taking place first as rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It may look good, but eventually it's going to sink. And so, all these ill-fated acts by Congress and missteps in the educational system have led Dr. Anthony Muhammad to his leadership platform stance that school climate and culture are essential in a school's success. So let's take a look at what and how cultural change can take place in an effective way. When looking at the ineffectiveness of putting technical change before cultural change, Dr. Muhammad refers to a quote by Dr. Larry Lazard, who put it best. Culture eats technical change for breakfast. You can change the structure any way you want, but if the building culture doesn't embrace the change, it will fail miserably. So now that the backwards ideology of education had been identified, Dr. Muhammad had to find a way to get people on the bus. Dr. Muhammad refers to cultural change as moving the bus forward. If you can get the right people on the bus with everyone in the right seat and the bus moving in the right direction, then your school will create a positive culture that will ultimately allow your school to achieve its objectives. Your school's culture could go one of two ways. It could be a healthy school culture where educators believe in the ability of all their students to achieve and succeed, and they adopt practices and procedures that support these beliefs. Or you could have a toxic school culture where educators believe that student success is based off of what the students know from the prior years and their willingness to pay attention to the curriculum. Basically, your staff doesn't believe in universal achievement. And at the root of toxic culture is frustration, causing staff to deflect blame onto others or create alliances with people who are experiencing the similar struggle that they are. And after identifying the two types of school culture, Dr. Muhammad knew where he had to start to get people on the bus. The first step is acknowledgement. As an administrator, it's your role to identify where your school needs support and how you can provide support for your staff without passing judgment. Dr. Muhammad refers to these areas of focus as elephants in the room. There's something you just can't avoid. It could be race, religion, poverty. Whatever it is that your school is facing, you have to be willing to take it head on so your bus can keep moving on. Once you've confronted the elephant in the room and you've taken it head on, your second step is to take action. Dr. Muhammad uses three components to building school culture effectively: commitment, reflection, and prescription. This is where you take your staff from a me mentality to a we mentality, and you can set a goal based off your area of focus, but keep in mind, setting a goal isn't enough. You have to be willing to change your behavior and periodically use data for objective feedback on the process. The second component is reflection. Remember that data we talked about in the first component? Well, this is what you should use to provide you feedback. Keep in mind, in a healthy school culture, data is not good or bad. It is a way to help you determine if you should continue your process or change the way things are being done. And if you follow the first two components successfully, the third component, prescription, will be a byproduct, where your school will collaborate as a common practice, and all three components become ingrained in the daily routine and practices of your staff and school.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Muhammad describes his leadership platform as productive organization behavior versus unproductive behavior, or simply put, healthy versus toxic culture. So let's take a look at some healthy versus toxic behavior. In a toxic culture, staff will focus on a problem and dwell or complain about that problem. In a healthy culture, staff will focus on a way to overcome the problem through problem solving. In a toxic culture, staff view colleagues as people to complain to, or as Dr. Muhammad puts it, treats colleagues as trash receptacles. In a healthy culture, staff view colleagues as resources. So ultimately, how can you cultivate and grow your school's culture as a future administrator? The first step is to be transparent about your purpose. The second step is to foster growth and collaboration with support for your staff. Be sure to build your staff's capacity of skills, knowledge, and tools to support growth. And finally, make your expectations clear. People can't be held accountable for expectations they don't know exist. With all that being said, I will leave you with an analogy from Dr. Muhammad that sums up his leadership platform perfectly. If you are a gardener, you can go out and buy the best seeds and the most expensive gardening tools to grow an amazing garden. But if you don't have good soil, then you won't be able to grow anything. Your culture is your soil. Dr. Muhammad's ideology resonated a lot with my elevator speech and many of my professional core values. Zig Ziglar once said, "Outstanding people have one thing in common, an absolute sense of mission." My mission is to support staff to create a positive environment for students to feel safe and successful. In order to do that, I must create a healthy school culture. I will involve families, community, and staff in our school vision because they are the most important stakeholders in our school. Just like Dr. Muhammad's research shows, I will be purposeful in every decision I make by being transparent, doing everything I can to foster growth and collaboration, and helping build the capacity for my staff, while having clear expectations about our school vision, our purposes, and our goals. Here are the NELP standards that fit with Dr. Muhammad's leadership platform. Component 1.2. Program completers understand and demonstrate the capacity to lead improvement processes that include data use, design, implementation, and evaluation. Component 2.1. Program completers understand and demonstrate the capacity to reflect on, communicate about, cultivate, and model professional dispositions and norms. Component 3.1. Program completers understand and demonstrate the capacity to use data to evaluate, design, cultivate, and advocate for a supportive and inclusive school culture. Component 4.3. Program completers understand and can demonstrate the capacity to evaluate, develop, and implement formal and informal assessments. Component 6.2. Program completers understand and demonstrate the capacity to evaluate, develop, and advocate for data-informed and equitable resourcing plan that supports school improvement and student development. And finally, Component 7.3. Program completers understand and have the capacity to personally engage in, as well as collaboratively engage school staff in, professional learning designed to promote reflection, cultural responsiveness, and distributed leadership. I hope you enjoyed my presentation on Dr. Muhammad's leadership platform.
Gary! I was just looking for the sports channel, Gary.